Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am joined by Brian E. Roach. I guess no fun and games or anything like that, Brian. Feeling pretty dejected at this point. How are you?
This has been a very poopy weekend of football for both of us, and that's about all I can say.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin with all of this. I mean, I'm going to tell you how I felt, and I don't know that I necessarily was 100%. I don't know. Was I forthcoming with this? Am I backpedaling? I don't know. I can't remember what I said for our pregame, but I can tell you how I felt this morning. And I felt like as I'm seeing, that Deshaun Watson and others aren't playing, and I'm like, well, if I start watching this Titans game and I see that Ryan Tannehill's playing like Peyton Manning all of a sudden in this game against some of the, Texans backups, mainly, A.J. McCarron or lack thereof of DeAndre Hopkins. I forget who else they may have had sitting out. But I wasn't feeling good, even if the Steelers would have been able to beat the Ravens. I wasn't feeling good about them making the postseason. I think the bigger aspect of this, though, however, is I would have preferred them to at least finish the season 9-7. Now, I will say one thing. Just to throw it out there right away. There's a lot of folks out there who are like, well, what the hell, man? They couldn't beat the Ravens backups. And it's like, the Steelers have been playing with backups for practically all season long. I understand people are like, they expect a Super Bowl run, and they're thinking, well, 8-8 is mediocrity, and if that's what the standard is here, and blah, blah, blah. Look, you know what I mean? This could have easily been, and we just said this off air, this could have easily been a 3 or 4 win team. This could easily be a franchise that's been like the New York Giants, who've won Super Bowls, and that's all the more they've been able to talk about for years now, amidst some major changes with coaching and front office and quarterbacks, everything like that. And this isn't the same type of situation here. This is a franchise that was immediately down on their luck from week 2, and already in the hole 0-2, that made a pretty admirable run and was still in playoff contention here at the end. Would I have liked things to have been a little different? Yes, but again, this is careful what you wish for is the words that I like to throw around a lot, because we heard in the offseason, we heard a lot of, there were people that were very high on Duck Hodges, even in training camp. And remember, we were pulling back on that. And even when he got to play, we were still pulling back on that. And you see how that kind of ends up when you don't have good quarterback play in the NFL, when the offense cannot really do anything. You end up with 10 points every game, and that's not good enough to get the job done. There were a lot of other ugly things that occurred in this game, but I still think from a standpoint of pulling back on everything here, this isn't where, this team got to 8 wins, and it's like, hey, everybody was crowning, I don't want to throw them under the bus just yet, but there was a certain other team that everyone was crowning a Super Bowl champion, or several, that didn't even get to 8 wins, okay? That's where I'm kind of at with this. So if your comments are among the get rid of this guy, get rid of all these coaches, get rid of that person, get rid of this, get rid of that, I don't know that I'm necessarily on board with that.
No, I'm not on board with that at all. Look, actually, our wonderful supporter and contributor Tina Rivers just in the back rooms threw a quote out, and I want to give her credit for it. And that quote is, "Eventually, when a train wrecks, there are casualties." This is a season that could have been a train wreck from game 2. It wasn't. But at some point, playing with quarterbacks that are below, the standard, playing with your second level running back, playing without your starting wide receivers, losing your center for a variety of games, all that stuff eventually does catch up with you. And while, this game in particular, I'm disappointed with, I'm 100% with you. When I woke up this morning, call it hangover from the Ohio State loss. I don't know.
Oh, I wasn't going to bring that up. I'm sorry, buddy.
I had no positivity going into this game. And then hearing, that, as you said, they're going to sit players, knowing they didn't really have anything to play for. I tried to take a little joy in the Patriots' loss, but even that felt hollow to me. It was more an impending sadness that the season was going to be over, and I kind of knew there was not a thing they could do about it. My only hope was somehow they'd go out, being able to defeat the Ravens, and I don't even want to call it a moral victory, just so that I could get a win in my own interest, for my own soul-soothing needs.
Yes.
But it didn't happen. And the way it didn't happen bothers me. It certainly, we like to say it was a team effort. This was a team effort, or team lack of effort, whatever you want to call it. Certainly the Ravens backups were inspired, those that played, but let's not pretend that it was a full quadre of just backups.
Yeah.
The Ravens defense played a lot of starters. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And, so it's not just that they're playing second level players on the Ravens. They're not. And Robert Griffin III has been a starter in the league at various times. And as I said to you before we started, my concern is that they simply did not look prepared for the Ravens to run the exact offense they've been running all season with Robert Griffin III. It's almost like they thought something else was going to happen, and that didn't seem well thought out. But let me resoundingly say this for the fire anybody's crowd, for that group. You've got to somehow gain a little, solidity in your thought process and some foundation, because you can walk through, as you said, you walk through the Browns, walk through the Cowboys, look at where the Patriots gave up a game that they really needed to get a bye, where they've never won a Super Bowl when they've had to play on Wild Card Weekend, and lose to the Dolphins.
Yeah,
in New England at home. At home.
That never happened. So we were making fun of that headed into this weekend. And before, when we were talking about all the different playoff scenarios, we were even still talking about the Bills possibly winning the division. We're like, oh no, it's Miami at New England. That's not going to happen. And Ryan Fitzpatrick. Go figure.
Exactly. So, look, the season is not the season we wanted. But if you are being honest with yourself, when Ben went out in the second game, this is not the season you thought you were going to get either. You never thought you were going to get the highs that you've had. You never thought you were going to be even remotely in contention. And I know that the vast majority of Steelers Nation thought that, because that's why they hated the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade initially, because, we need to draft a quarterback. Do we not all remember those things? So the fact that this team was able to get to where they were, I don't want to call it a moral victory, because it's not a moral victory, but there is some light to be seen in that, and that this defense grew, this defense carried the team. And all we can really do is hope that Ben comes back next season.
Well, he said as much, and the panic over that. I'll get to that in a second. I like the point that you brought up about RG3, and we discussed this before too. This just isn't like a backup quarterback in the vein of a Mason Rudolph or a Duck Hodges. This is a guy who played significant snaps and had major roles early on in his NFL career, and also a stint with the Browns where, I know he got hurt early, I think the first or second game of that season that they signed him, and then he came back and played like the last handful, and it was probably still sticking in his craw that he lost to Landry Jones in the final week of the season in a game that I think, were they up like 21-0 or something like that, or 21-7 at one point in that game, going back several years. So, you got things like that, and heavy criticism. There's always criticism. I think there's expectations because Steelers fans aren't accustomed to not being in the playoffs. Me and you were just talking about that. What do we do now? What do we record about? Maybe we'll talk about the Star Wars movie that just came out or something like that. That's if you saw it. But you're at a loss. It's like, I don't know what to do. And the other thing was, as far as backups, it's not as though Gus Edwards was a guy that was starting last year too. And we said we had a lot of respect for Justice Hill, and most of the other players were there and around. And it is what it is. It's a game that had a 90% chance of precipitation. It turned into a 190% chance of precipitation at game time, and it was one of those sloppy games where if you were already needing to rely on Doug Hodges to throw the ball around the field, you already knew that wasn't necessarily going to be a successful formula for the Steelers offense. And for 3 consecutive games with 3 consecutive losses, they scored 10 points in each of those games. Unacceptable, but I don't know that it's necessarily, there's people that are out there that are like, this goes back to the Todd Haley thing way back when everybody was like, oh, fire Todd Haley. Some of the decisions that are being made on the field or some of the things that are happening on the field have nothing to do with coaching and has everything to do with the 11 guys that need to execute the plays. And when you have Duck Hodges holding on to the ball for too long, or somebody misses a block, or there's a bad snap, or a tipped ball, or incompletions that maybe should be, whatever be the case, right? This goes down to the players needing to execute, protect the football, fumbles early on in the season that cost at least the San Francisco 49ers game, if not the game against the Baltimore Ravens. When you were looking at the Steelers early on and going and starting 0-3, and we'll reflect on some of that, this is where everything was installed. This is Ben Roethlisberger. Remember this guy Dante Moncrief that they signed? We're gonna help plug the hole with Antonio Brown. Juju Smith-Schuster's going to be like an all-pro player. James Conner's back and at full strength and full health, and none of that was there for this entire season. You almost get the you get the fantasy role or the video game, playing types that I'm going to build a dynasty, and now you get to see what the second or third guy off the bench is going to be. And Mason Rudolph was that first guy off the bench, and he's a guy that many people probably within the Steelers organization we're hoping to maybe bank the future on. I don't think any book's closed on him. As far as Duck Hodges is concerned, he's a guy that I think will be brought back too, because now you have 2 quarterbacks that have some starting experience. They have some NFL experience, and that is valuable to any franchise, but you do hope that your franchise guys come back. So I wouldn't be jumping the gun necessarily to people want to sign all of these guys, whether they're available or not, like Derek Carr or Teddy Bridgewater. You should see the names I see thrown out there. Or, hey, move up in the draft and draft Burrows. It's like, with what draft collateral do they have to do something like that? And, and there's some sense of panic out there, too. It's some of the Yinzers. I'll throw my cousin under the bus as one, watching that LSU game yesterday and saying, oh, man, it's going to be Burrows and Mayfield and Jackson twice a year, each of those guys for 6 games. And I'm like, well, how's that any different than the Browns still have to face Burrows and Jackson, and the Ravens you still don't even know if Burrows is going to be any good. We still don't know if Mayfield's going to be any good, and Jackson's having a heck of a season, and we've seen guys take a slide or slump too. For all we know, we don't know that Ben's going to come back at full strength, although they say, this guy, he's 37 right now. The surgery he's having, maybe it'll make him stronger or better. Maybe a year of rest may be good for him. Maybe it'll be terrible for him. So there's so many things that you could throw out here as far as intangibles and variables and factors of stuff where all you can do is speculate. And I'm not ready to go that far down the speculation road here, but we've gotten so far off the path of this game. At least I have. I'm coming back. I'm going to come back to this now because, I was telling you, and you just said your piece on the defense, and I said I wasn't necessarily going to rest all of my laurels on the defense here because, okay, there were times where they weren't getting off the field. Maybe they were committing, TJ Watt was constantly in the neutral zone. They were committing penalties, self-defeating type things. Right out the gate, you mentioned the 11-play, 7-minute drive. But the big thing for me is that they kept the Steelers in this game still up until the Duck Hodges fumble, because basically what you had was field goal, and then the Steelers actually take the lead. It was like, holy crap, 10 plays, 75 45 yards and ends in Benny Snell football for a touchdown. And Benny Snell actually looked good there, and you're getting a sense of, you're getting the feels. You're starting to feel like, hey, they can maybe get this done. The Ravens come back around 9-7, and then all of a sudden it's like, you have disaster strike, and it struck, man. It was like a dagger to the heart. 16-7 at halftime. It's like, if the Steelers at least do something other than cough up the ball, even if they don't score points here, it's going to be 9-7 at halftime is your best hope, and you get the ball to start the second half. I really think that was the big turning point in that game, and you won't convince me otherwise on that, because then I think the rest of it just kind of goes downhill. You lose steam. We talked about the roller coaster ride coming in, and you're ready to get off. That's where it was starting, man. It was already, there were no bumps, there were no other things there. It was just, everything just fell apart and collapsed at the end like a house of cards.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you point to, Duck's fumble in the first half, and you're absolutely right. That's a big turning point. If you can go into the half, even if you're down by 9-7, you can feel pretty good about coming out and getting the ball. Now, even down 16-7, if they come out and do something, because they're going to get the ball first, but what do? What has become a refrain from this particular version of the Steelers offense of far too often 3 and out. So that just builds off of and adds on top of it. The way the game ended, as it was out of control, as it was completely out of hand, and things just started to snowball, you kind of get. But maybe that could go a little different, as you said, if you avoid those initial mistakes. And man, this has been a consistent theme of the second half of this season. Is you have to play clean ball, and you have to play, as mistake-free as you can. And when they played mistake-free, they were in games. And when they didn't, you never felt like they were going to, ever be able to get to 17. And oftentimes they didn't. The defense did its best, but, it's one of the things I tweeted out in the first quarter of this game. The defense was on the field at one point, 11 minutes and 52 seconds, while the offense had been on the field for 56 seconds. And, you're just not going to get far doing that. The Ravens determined their game. They played their game. And in this particular instance, with an anemic offense that simply could not do anything, they were in control of the game. But had that gone even a little different, right? Had as you said, if they just don't give up that huge turnover in their own end of the field, and kick the ball, and the Ravens just don't get extra points, who knows? I will tell you right now, my feeling is they still would have lost. But that's just based on my own unsettled emotions from the way that the second half went down, because it simply wasn't good, and they fell apart pretty much in all aspects of things, and they weren't helped. In some ways there were some questionable calls, but I don't even feel comfortable saying the refs stink about this game, because the calls that I thought were somewhat questionable. They shouldn't have even been in the position to make them questionable. Bad decisions at a couple of different places, and what they had decided to do defensively, which apparently was just hit the quarterback as much as humanly possible. Didn't work because he didn't have the ball.
Yeah, Brian. It's going to sound like complaining about spilled milk here. I think I'm going to cry and whine a little bit, and I don't know that we're going to have the same complaint, but I'm glad that Mike Tomlin challenged the 4th and 1 or whatever fake punt, because to me, and I don't understand why, the entire broadcast, all of a sudden now they started using this almost sky cam overhead back of the end zone view for several plays, including that one where they went and cut the camera angle and you couldn't even see anything that happened, okay? And I'm like, I'm so annoyed with it. I'm like, why are they showing things like this? This is not for the lifetime of us watching football. This is not the way we watch football. And so now I'm trying to adjust, and I can't see players. I can't see formations. I can't see wide receivers. I mean, this is really great that I could see RG3's rear end, but that's about all. And then all of a sudden they go to the punt play, and when it's a fake, you don't see the whole thing materialize. And it just kind of seemed to me that, and I got to see a better replay of this because shame on CBS and the NFL, they didn't show a good replay of it. The only replay we got was some like half-cocked angle, and we didn't get anything that was like down the line or zoomed in or anything that you would normally get. No, they shelled out to their sponsors because they didn't get, because John Harbaugh screwed them, being a former special teams coach, screwed them with the fake punt. They didn't get to go to commercial. So now they had to run these ads, and then you just come back to, after the advertisement, Bill Vinovich saying, the call in the field stands. And, a former colleague of all of ours, that's worked all over the place as far as, writing and talking about the NFL, Neil Coulong put out, the Brotherhood of the NFL, he says something to the effect of, when it comes to pass interference and spots, they're not going to overturn anything, but I still felt when I first saw that, I'm like, something smells funny here. And it doesn't help when the NFL isn't transparent with these things and just show us the replay and prove me wrong on it. And you didn't get anything. You just got the, the call in the field stands, Pittsburgh's charged with a timeout. I'm like, this is just ridiculous. But I am glad that Tomlin threw a flag on that, or threw the challenge flag on it. I do kind of wish he did throw the challenge flag maybe on the Deontay Johnson, but I will say in my own right, I do think his hand was down out of bounds before his foot. I believe it was his back foot would have been the first body part that would have landed in bounds, which would have been the double toe tap deal and a touchdown. So I'm still with you. The referees still stink.
Well, they do, but it's not. There was a lot of complaint about the roughing the passer TJ Watt got called for. People I saw on Twitter, people, it's terrible, it's the worst call ever. It was a flop in the chest, though. Look, was it ticky tap? Did RG3 do an Oscar worthy performance to draw the flag? Sure, but at the same time, TJ elbowed him in the chest, and he didn't need to. So, if I can't prove that it's the flop or that the ref actually saw what he did. So,
no, I think he thought what he saw, and it was an NBA level, NBA playoffs level type flop.
Oh, it absolutely was. But, the argument is that there was a penalty worthy action that actually occurred because it was an unnecessary thing that was done. Did it really, cause the flop? No. But hey, it is what it is. I couldn't. By the time we got, in the middle of the third quarter, I couldn't even get the will to throw my GIF out there. It wasn't there. I wasn't feeling any grown ass men things, even though Cam Hayward is a grown ass man. Even from the start of this game, and whether this is me projecting, which is certainly possible, but you didn't even feel the sense of urgency. Like, look, we heard that they're not going to play their starters in Houston. We know that the Titans have been playing great ball. There's very little chance we have of getting in. So we're just here to play.
Well, I mean,
but I don't know. It just felt I did not feel an intensity coming off of these guys that I normally feel.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things to talk about. Among the most, the Cleveland Browns didn't get as many victories this season as the Steelers, and in fact, fall short to the Cincinnati Bengals today, of all teams, winning their second game and sealing the fate of Freddie Kitchens, who ends up getting fired. We just saw that news come across.
Yep. Bye, Felicia.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, they didn't even they were 7-8-1 last year, and they're going to finish now 6-10. Yikes. You know what I mean? It's just, everybody was crowning them, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is not to really poke fun or take jabs at the Cleveland Browns. But most people, when we're going back to our initial conversation, you are immediately thinking, oh, great, this is what we're going to have to listen to, is the Browns winning the division or the Steelers ending up in the basement. Because when they were at a certain point of this season, they were 0-3 and facing a similar 0-3 Cincinnati Bengals team that you didn't know was going to turn out and have the top pick overall in the draft and have the worst record in the NFL. So, this is a team that went out. They had loads of not only first-round draft picks, but they had, over the last several years, the top draft pick, right? And then they had oodles of money and spent loads of cash and made trades for big name players and all the flashy gizmos and widgets and everything else, and it amounted to 6 wins. And you got to still think, put yourself in the other, put the shoe on the other foot here. If you don't have Mike Tomlin, you're probably having a season like that or worse. Maybe the talent's there and they need better coaching. Maybe not. I don't know. You don't know what's going to happen now in the offseason. There's so many things that are going on. But this is just one of those things. I had to put that out there because it's just crazy to me. And even though there's a lot of first round talent on the Steelers defense, not all of that talent came from the Steelers drafting these players. You have guys like Tyson Alualu or Mark Barron that weren't necessarily highly thought of by their previous teams, and that's how they ended up in Pittsburgh. Joe Hayden released by the Cleveland Browns too, because they wanted to make a change, move forward with younger players, et cetera, et cetera. So you start to add some of these components here. Guess who's the guys that are putting their imprint on this? Probably Mike Tomlin has a lot of influence on it. Well, not probably, he does. But, a lot of people are still going to say their piece about Keith Butler or whatever. And this is a team that has been leading the league, in as far as I'm not sure where they're at with sacks this year. Brian, are they the league leader again? We'll look that up here in a second. But we did get something from Christopher Carter. I believe Chris still works with DK on Pittsburgh Sports, and he mentioned that the T.J. Watt's forced fumble and Hayden's interception gave the Steelers 38 turnovers on the season, and it's more than New England. They were tied at 36 heading into the games today, but New England got nothing off of the Dolphins. And unless the Seahawks were to get 7 turnovers in the late game, the Steelers will end with the most in the NFL. That's the largest reason why they were able to get to 8-8. So I think credit is due where it needs to be due there. And the same thing with Terrell Austin, I think, coming in is a big advantage for this team, having multiple defensive backs coaches. So I think, when you go to this season, it was almost like, hey, this is all scrapped. Now maybe what you do or don't have with Mason Rudolph. Will he grow and things of that nature? You got to see what it might be like with Duck Hodges there. Thank God we didn't get to see Paxton Lynch come in. I did not want to throw in the towel. I mean, if the game absolutely means nothing, why would you give those reps to him anyway? This is a guy that's probably not going to be on the roster. And I know a lot of people are going to be talking about getting a better backup or whatever for Ben. I still think the guys they have are more than fine. You just hope that Ben doesn't get hurt in week 2 if he were to get dinged up or isn't able to play. It's just for a week or two, as it had been in the past whenever somebody else came in. 1 or 2 game spell, I think either of these guys, they can make up for it, especially depending on who the opponent is. But when you put somebody like Duck Hodges out there and you start to get film on him, then everybody's kind of got the game plan and they know what to do. And it was pressure him, pressure the bejesus out of him, and he will probably do something that, Mike Tomlin said, hey, don't kill us, right? Almost. Although I will say, a lot of people were complaining about the fade to Juju Smith-Schuster. That's a play that that's something that might work. It wasn't the best thrown ball. You're in wet conditions. I'm assuming that's the primary route that's run there. I don't know. Juju just could not get going. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, Brian, if we find out there's some underlying reason for that. Maybe he has some injury that hasn't been disclosed, or he hasn't fully healed, or something going on. You know what I mean? Some type of ghost in the machine as to why he didn't have the season that we all felt he would have had this year. I don't know. I don't know if I want to say anything else about this game. Jordan Berry drops a ball that was already injury to insult. Duck Hodges pretty much the intentional grounding really bothered me too, because I guess by letter of law it probably is, and he's getting dragged down from the back in the end zone. And I thought initially that it was a horse collar tackle. The way that he was brought to his knees, it was pretty vicious, but I guess he really wasn't grabbed by the nameplate or whatever. And I guess, it is what it is there, and you end up with a safety, and it's just, there's injury to insult, the nails in the coffin, and you see the other game going on, and Tennessee's just running away with it. I think Derrick Henry ran into the tunnel like Forrest Gump when they went up 3 scores, and what else is there that you could do? I mean, you let it get out of your hands. They weren't able to defeat the Buffalo Bills on their home turf, and then they weren't able to pull up the game against the Jets for any variety of reasons that you want to point fingers or anything at. But there's a lot of men out there that played with a lot of heart, and I think just you get to a certain point where you just know you're defeated, and I think that's where they were.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And to answer your question from 5 minutes ago, they are tied. They are tied with the league lead in sacks with 52, tied with the Chiefs, who also ended the season with 52 sacks. So that's 2 ahead of the Bears and the Vikings.
Yeah, so that's 3 consecutive years where they get to the quarterback, and they were able to create the splash plays, create the turnovers. Now, if only you could get a guy that could throw the football and maybe lead the offense, call some audibles,
absolutely,
make some better decisions with the ball, like just throw it away. Which is, as much as I made fun of Andy Dalton watching him today, that's what he did. Although he threw some picks too that were pretty bad, but luckily they have a guy that's proven to do all of these things. He's just going to have to come back and be able to prove he could do it in 2020.
Yeah, this defense is going to, as you said, they're tied for the league lead in sacks. They're going to lead the league in turnovers, which was a huge thing this season. And quite frankly, the only reason this team gets to 8-8 is because that defense is leading the league in sacks and turnovers. They're causing the splash plays. And that's why this team was able, and I mean, we've been saying it week in and week out, the defense is what carries this team. And it would be nice, as Mike Tomlin often says, if complementary football could be played on a consistent basis. And maybe that will happen when Ben comes back. If and when Ben comes back, I need wood. I got to knock on it really fast because I need Ben to come back. Look, I get it. People are going to criticize Ben as well. There's still people who are hating on Ben because of, he's had some down games and not great games, but nonetheless, he still is a guy that I think would have changed this season had he been able to stay healthy and play. And we wouldn't be where we are right now. So I look forward to seeing Ben next season with this defense, hopefully growing yet again. And also, hopefully with some growth out of Deontay Johnson, who has certainly stepped up. Maybe Juju comes back and is a bit better. And with Benny Snell and James Conner, maybe splitting carries or something, who knows? We'll talk about what they need to address in the draft as time goes on. But, this is not, it's a stinky end of the season because we all want to be able to have Steelers football next week, and we can't have it. Nonetheless, it's a better end of the season than anybody would have anticipated at the end of week 2. So, let's just take that for what it is and look at it and say, let's see what happens next year.
Week 2, week 5, they were 1-4 when they lost an OT to the Ravens.
Yeah. But think about it. The minute Ben went down, everybody's like, season's over. We're done.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what you would think. But that's just, it's a standard response when you lose a Hall of Fame level franchise quarterback. At the same time, as I said, you got teams like the Cowboys who have Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott healthy for the whole season, and they still stunk. So, okay, they couldn't win. I guess it's not always just the coaching. It's sometimes even with star players. If you don't get what you're getting, there's a reason. So, it's not all doom and gloom. It is for this season at this point because it's over. But, we do have some things to hopefully look forward to within the next season. And, we'll come up with some stuff to talk about, man. We'll figure it out.
Well, there's lots of it. I mean, people are going to want to talk about Randy Fichtner. And did you listen to Dan Fouts talking? He was praising the coordinators. He was praising both Fichtner and Butler for the job they were doing with mix and match parts. I mean, even getting Minka on board, which, by the way, the CBS graphic was wrong. It said they traded for him after week 4. No, they traded for him after week 2. He played in week 3. He played against the 49ers, and he played against the Bengals, the weeks 3 and 4 opponents. Like, come on now. But the professor has got some chatter here, and he's chiming in, Brian. He was talking about Bud Dupree's emergence, and T.J. Watt is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. What if that has to do with Butler going back to actually managing the linebackers and not Joey Porter as the position coach? Very good point. A very excellent point, I would say. And he became the defensive coordinator right when Bud Dupree was drafted. So he hadn't really worked with him, but he has a long laundry list, like a Hall of Fame resume or at least a franchise resume of guys who are sack artists that he has coached as a outside linebackers position coach. James Harrison, Joey Porter, Lamar Woodley, Jason Worlds. And just going back to the sack thing and something to at least have, we're trying to keep something positive here because quite frankly, me and Brian were very ticked off and weren't even going to record this. So the fact that we're even, going on however long we are right now and still having things to talk about that, for a very lackluster game. You have, as far as a tandem, Bud Dupree and T.J. Watt, they're the second Steelers tandem in franchise history with 11 or more sacks in a single season. They're the first since James Harrison had 16 and Lamar Woodley had 11.5 in 2008. I believe the final tally, this was earlier for Michael Birch with the Steelers. He's part of the Steelers PR department. It was maybe earlier in the game, but I think it's still fairly accurate at 14.5 for Watt and 11 for Dupree. And then some more on T.J. Watt. I do believe he's got to be the Defensive Player of the Year. He punches the ball out. It was pretty much the only main highlight other than Benny Snell running over people for a couple decent gains. He punches the ball out. He did that, 8 times this year? So he's the only NFL player since 1990 to register at least 2 interceptions, 4 fumble recoveries, and 8 forced fumbles in a single season. To be able to do something like that where they're making up, records for you or whatever, he's got to be a shoo-in for that. And I guess that's a consolation prize for, how the season ends. Consolation prizes are, hey, didn't completely suck. Hey, that Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, actually, more than likely, if you put that on the scales, weighed in our favor. And, and then maybe a Defensive Player of the Year award deal. I don't know that Tomlin's going to get a Coach of the Year award because they didn't end up getting in the postseason and finishing strong with those 3 losses in a row to close everything out. But there was another one, and I don't have it in front of me, but it had something to do with the trio, too, because of Cam Hayward's sacks. And there was I think Cam has 9, and I'm going to I'm going to dig that one up here. But very, very interesting points when you're talking about the defense. I don't want to scapegoat them. And when you start talking about I'm not going to talk about the head coach. They're probably going to have to look for a wide receivers coach. I think that losing Darryl Drake, they'd already lost Richard Mann, and Darryl Drake could come in as the next replacement. And, it's just, you're seeing a little bit of the inconsistency there. So,
Now I gotta get this in because you brought up Dan Fouts.
I'm sorry.
So I have to give. Look, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I give him respect as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But there's a Twitter person out there, Lindell Whirling, Steelers fangirl from Fangirl Sports Network or something like that, who I follow. She doesn't follow me. I'm hurt and I'm upset by this, but she doesn't. But whatever.
Anyway. In fact, I'm going to unfollow
I know.
you.
You're going to unfollow me after this podcast. I get it. But anyway, she defended Dan Fouts because I think she's from San Diego and everybody loves him in San Diego. But I'm sorry, he sucks as an announcer. He's way past his best days. That's why we get stuck with him on all these third-tier games. And he just says stuff that doesn't make any sense. It annoys me to no end. And I need to keep he needs to retire from announcing. I'm sorry. But you brought up the thing about the coordinators and how he was praising them. this is just another example. Look, I get it. You could praise the Ravens offensive coordinator because he's been very creative and created something that hasn't been done in forever. The Ravens broke the rushing record, 40 odd years since the last time the record was broken, because nobody runs anymore. So he did something unique and new and creative. It's hard to praise. I'm not all down on Randy Fichtner, but I'm certainly in the lower half on him right now.
Well, hot seat for sure. He's got to show something next year, and being able to. There was no like other guy helping with the quarterbacks there, and just feel, hey, we've had a guy that's been here like 15 years or whatever. That's a future Hall of Famer. Has won multiple Super Bowls. I guess this is just on autopilot, and that kind of went all the hell in a handbasket.
I just look. That's the thing I've been preaching for half the season, is you have to figure out how to get the best and do the best for the people that you have on the team, and forget that this is not that this is an offense designed for Ben Roethlisberger, because you don't have Ben Roethlisberger anymore. And when it seemed like the game plan was doing that, I gave him praise. But it's a week-to-week thing. I swear he must be like a toddler. His attention span, is like, oh, look, shiny. I don't know. And the next week it's back to something that doesn't make sense. I get it. We've talked about this as well. It's a very difficult thing to do. Rebuild your offense from scratch on a moving train, because it's not like they had the preseason to do it. But by the time you get past 16 games, there should have been things that are really keyed for this. And I get it. He's limited. It was very clear. Devlin Hodges does not like to throw over the middle, or they limit when he does. And we've seen why, because when he does, the wrong team tends to catch it.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, too. That's the folks that are saying, we need a running back and we need a tight end. Well, when he doesn't throw in the middle of the field, who does that most hurt as far as catching the ball? Those two positions. So, those two positions were completely absent. I'm not necessarily – we'll get into talking about this, of course, with off-season needs and, of course, salary cap and things of that nature, who priority signings, et cetera, et cetera. But, geez, oh, man, I'm not ready to, necessarily throw Vance McDonald under the bus, or even Nick Vannett for that matter, who came in late to this whole deal too. Connor wasn't healthy. You don't know what his status will be in the future, if he can be healthy. Remember, Le'Veon Bell had all those knee injuries too and was still a star. And, Benny Snell may make that second-year leap too. So, and we're not even talking about Jalen Samuels, who's, his role certainly decreased with Duck Hodges under center, or
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it just, continue on with what you're saying. But, we're on the same page with this. But there were still people that were throwing Ben under the bus when he would have a bad game, too. He wasn't, 100% perfect all the time, and that wasn't good enough, and I think that's unfair. But then you see where a ceiling and floor is for certain players when that very good player is no longer on the field, and how all boats rise or fall with the way the tide goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and can we please stop with I'm going to trade every first-round pick for the next 6 centuries so that we can get Trevor Lawrence. Please stop. Stop with that nonsense.
Well, that's even more important because, I'm not only talking about salary cap considerations and keep trying to retain most of your core players, which I think the Steelers will. I think they'll have most of these guys back. I think the defense is where you're really looking at the contracts that are going to be up. You may have to focus on one or two because, the draft produced. Here's another thing. Oh, these guys can never draft anything or draft anybody that's blah, 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 worth whatever. They never sign anybody worth blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, hey, look, they traded. I thought Vance McDonald was an excellent trade. You look at the draft from a few years ago, it's produced who we're trying to call the defensive player of the year, TJ Watt. I remember everybody was like, oh, you just drafted him because his name was Watt. You should have took somebody else. All the draft experts are only validated whenever they're right, and are they ever right in praising someone's pick? Very seldom, right?
When it's a no-brainer, but even then they get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah, well, they do, and they do with a lot of the quarterbacks. You look at Mayfield throwing 2-3 picks today. Darnold was in the same business too. Who's to say what those quarterbacks are going to be like going forward? There's no such thing as a surefire pick, and even a guy like Mason Rudolph that you end up taking later on, and I think getting an excellent value for, if he doesn't get knocked out in that game, we were sitting there, Brian, and his hand was still up in the air, and he was knocked out cold. I think that changed a lot of the season too. I would have liked to have seen him play a full season, not impeded by any type of injuries. They still were somehow able to gut out 3 wins in a row with him. As the starting quarterback. There was the whole Myles Garrett helmet hitting thing on a Thursday night. That was probably the last ugliest game, because the Jets game was ugly last week, but there were so many guys that were getting hurt and things that were moving parts that it's really hard for me to just be disappointed in that game, and that carried over and spilled over into this loss as well. So yeah, I'm not necessarily head hunting. I'm not you're going to see a lot of things happening in the NFL in the next 24 hours. Coaches that are retained or fired. Some guys have already been given their walking papers. We said Kitchens. We said the Jaguars coach is gone now too. Was that Doug Marrone? Yep. Yeah, there's another team right there. You know what I mean? And somebody was like, Dan Marino's rookie season, 20 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. Gardner Minshew, 20. Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Are we calling him the next Dan Marino now? Like, come on, let's slow our roll. They're doing it in jest, I get. But there's going to be somebody that's like, well, the Steelers passed over Minshew. These storylines are all going to crawl out now because there's no more games to look forward to with the Steelers playing, to where we have anything new, any developments we're really going to be able to talk about. And as far as like drafting and free agents, like I said, that draft a few years ago was T.J. Watt, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner. They knocked it out of the park where they had to. And I understand you don't like some of the picks here or there, and not everything's going to work out. Not every pick is going to make the team every year or become some superstar player. Maybe they'll be a role player, whatever. And then you have some signings. We talked about trades. Minkah Fitzpatrick coming in here. Steven Nelson. Mark Barron's still going to be around a little bit. They moved up for Devin Bush. The sky's the limit. These are some young Barron was a first-round pick, and I think he's still relatively youngish. I think he's like in his mid-20s. But Devin Bush is very young. Minkah Fitzpatrick's still very young. They got a lot to work with here. And TJ Watt's only in his 3rd year in the league. So this is just amazing stuff for me. It's a lot to look forward to. It's just unfortunate that other circumstances made it so we couldn't look forward to it beginning next week. And I guess the few things I could really relish is just seeing the way some of these other games went. The Cowboys. Here's a team that is blowing a lot of money and a lot of picks on different things in that nature, and they missed the postseason. And that's always fun, especially for some real diehard old school Steelers fans who don't like the Cowboys and saw Roger Staubach make the all-time top 100 quarterbacks or NFL 100 quarterbacks list over Terry Bradshaw, the man who's beat him several times in the big game, has more rings, and et cetera, et cetera. I had to throw that out there, even though some of us have a love-hate with Terry. And, you look at the Cleveland losing to the worst team. Here's a coach that's literally getting fired over that because they had so much on the line and such high expectations. Now they got to move on another year and see what they're going to do and where they can improve. Other teams may be completely wiping the slate clean. You saw Tom Coughlin's been ousted out of Jacksonville. Doug Marrone's out of there now. They've traded some of their players. They got disgruntled people. Some things are just a mess. There's teams that are still trying to rebound from rebuilding, like the New York Giants. So, like where the Steelers are, you see what they did, and you see some of these young men that got some valuable experience this season. Some of them may still not even make the team next year, but I think it's a really good foundation moving forward, and I guess that's all the more I could be kind of happy about, because that's all the more we keep going back to the beginning of the season when Ben went down. That's really where I was invested in saying, okay, let's see what these guys can do, and it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, that's that's all you can take away from this year, is that guys who probably would not have gotten a lot of playing time got a lot of playing time on the offensive side of the ball. There were some things that got exposed as well, which we'll talk about as time goes on. But if you're a Steelers fan, what you should really look at here is you got a glimpse about what's life going to be like in many ways once Ben Roethlisberger is really gone. Look, we've had this conversation back and forth about Mason Rudolph, and I've told you I don't think Mason Rudolph is the answer. I even said it the day he was drafted. I don't hate
you're
Mason
sticking
Rudolph.
to you're sticking to your draft takes then.
Well, that one I'm sticking to. That one I'm sticking to because I thought it was stupid when they did it.
Yeah.
And I still think it was not the best choice. But I think he can be a competent backup. I don't believe he can be a franchise quarterback. And look, Devlin Hodges, there are people tweeting out now that Devlin Hodges has taken his last snap in the NFL. I don't know if I believe that either.
No.
I think that's going a little far.
Brian Hoyer still has a job, man, with how many teams? Ryan Fitzpatrick is still somehow surfacing to I don't know that the cream rises to the cream rises to the crop because there's also turds that float to the top of the bowl too. But he's
yeah.
I don't how many teams has he played with and been around
100
things. Yeah, I mean Josh McCown too. Between both of them, I think they played for all 32. So yeah, I don't buy that for a minute with Hodges.
No, I don't buy that for a second. Again, that being said, do I think Devlin Hodges is going to be a starting quarterback in this league? No, I don't. Did I think that prior to any of this? No, I didn't. But I think he's got good experience now, and he can grow from it, and he could be potentially an experienced, competent backup. But he's not the guy that's going to carry your team, and that's what you got to look forward to when Ben's finally gone, unless they find that guy again somehow miraculously. But there's benefit to seeing that from a Steelers fan standpoint because we're all a bunch of spoiled brats. and we expect to win every game, and when we don't, then we throw a hissy fit. And I'm including myself in that group, so it's not me just insulting the Yinzers out there. I Yins as much as anybody else, but
maybe not as badly though.
No,
I think you come from some type of logical perspective where you're not trying to oust everyone from the organization or blame the Rooneys for every little thing that happens just because they didn't win their 10th Super Bowl in a row. That's just, it's not even realistic if you're Patriots.
I like to think my Yinzing has been tempered by some years of experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've been through the 80s too, so that does, that was a wild ride. And I mean, I'm with you. I don't necessarily know that I'm on the, I'm not in any sense of urgency to find another quarterback, and I've even been on record saying with Mason Rudolph that we have no idea if he's going to get on the field by the time Ben retires. We don't know what Ben's longevity is just yet, so I'm not putting that cart in front of the horse. There's people talking about Jalen Hurts in the second round already, and I'm like, hey, look, we're going to find out what the team needs are, and we're going to talk about players that have contracts that are now expiring, are going to be free agents and things of that nature in future episodes, and we'll cover all that jazz. But I do have one. I did find that stat. I'm going to throw it out real quick. Of course, it's Michael Birch once again with two hitters here because he retweeted his own tweet, which, man, I don't know. That's some next level stuff, Brian, when you're talking about the Twitter. He was talking about Cam Hayward's sack. His, 3 different players that recorded at least 9 sacks. Steelers are the only team in the NFL with 3 players that have recorded at least 9 sacks. That's as of, a couple hours ago, so about 6 o'clock or so in the evening. And he also says the Steelers trio is the second in franchise history to each record at least 9 sacks in a season, the first since 2001, which, if they're the second, the only other one would be the trio of Kendrell Bell. There's a blast from the past. He had 9. Jason Gilden with 12 and Joey Porter with 9 as well. So those are all linebackers that I do believe Keith Butler was working with them all the way back in 2001, I think, right? Yeah, he's been around for a minute.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll find out. There's Keith Butler is such like a just regular run-of-the-mill name. But aside from the disappointing exit to the season and not having football next week, let's be honest. How much more are we going to get out of this? I don't know. If they would have ended up going up to New England, which it's still very satisfying to know that New England has to play an extra game now. So let's see them do this and rebound from losing to the Dolphins. But having to go up to New England with Duck Hodges wasn't necessarily going to be the against the genius or architect or whatever you want to call him and Bill Belichick. I don't know that was necessarily a winning proposition either, and most people would have already written the season off at that point. So in some, reflection on this, maybe we are glad that it's over and we could just start moving on.
Yeah, look, As they say, what's it, this goofy movie that every toddler girl loves, and what is it? Let It Go. We got to let
Frozen.
this season go. Yeah, that's that thing. Frozen 2, whatever it may be. I just know there's a goofy snowman in it. But
much like you.
Yeah, I am a goofy snowman,
and he likes warm hugs.
I am not. Yeah, I guess I do too. Who doesn't like a nice warm hug? I just don't like toast. But
who doesn't like parfait? Everybody like parfait.
Everybody likes parfait.
Say, hey, you want some parfait? Oh no, I don't want no parfait.
yes. There you go.
We've done that before.
We have done that before. We just got to let it go and move forward, and hope that. I don't even know what we hope for yet. I have to examine the rest of this the group and decide. It might be nice if somebody who never won, the Super Bowl. I don't know. I just don't want it to be the Patriots, which I don't think it will be.
Yeah, I mean, even at this point, I mean, if the Ravens are a favorite, I mean, you got to. I'll tip my cap to them. As painful as it is, as much as I dislike them, and particularly the guy I really dislike is Marcus Peters, like talking crap the entire game. It's just like, oh man,
Yeah, what the hell was with RG3 strutting around like, oh, I am the king of swing? I get it, but gee, many Christmas, what a cocky little bastard.
Yeah, the cockiness, even Justin Tucker falling on his keister and then doing the little like riverboat dance or whatever, river dance or whatever the heck you call it. Could be both.
Yeah.
But it's just like, come on, man. I'm like, this is just, you kind of hope that those are the kind of guys you like to see just get smacked in the jaw once or twice and get it right back, given right back to them. But I don't know who's going to be able to slow that. That's a runaway train at this point. The only thing I can say is resting some of the guys that they did, you got to hope that they're sharp, because remember the Steelers did this thing and they took like 2 weeks off, and then they came out and the Jaguars almost embarrassed them right out the gate, and then they were playing from behind the whole time, and they had the firepower to catch up, but they didn't have enough to end up with the win at the end. And I know a lot of people are going to fire back with that too, and they're going to say, well, here's all how many playoff games has Tomlin won since blah 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 blah. Well, there haven't been that many people that have still been coaching their teams for that long. And we mentioned one, it was Jason Garrett, but Andy Reid doesn't have a whole lot to show for. John Harbaugh, he has one Super Bowl, but they have some losing seasons and missed the postseason as well. When you stick with some of these guys like that, Pete Carroll's another long tenured guy, and of course Bill Belichick. I think that kind of takes care of the whole old guard there, because Mike McCarthy, he lost his job with the Packers last year. He was also a long tenured guy. Ron Rivera lost his job now this year. So, there's something to be said about consistency and having a system in place. And when I talk to a lot of people who aren't Steelers fans, they really did give some credit to Mike Tomlin and the Steelers for having that foundation that's there, and that is the real reason why they're able to get here to where they are and finish at least with somewhat of a respectable record. I would have liked to seen double digits, but it didn't happen. Just one other final note: Keith Butler, he was not the linebackers coach there yet. He was in Cleveland still. He didn't arrive until 2003, so I was incorrect, but he has been around for a very long time. 2003, that's nothing to sneeze at. So, Brian, any closing thoughts, my friend?
There you go.
That's about perfect. So, folks, thanks for joining us here. We'll probably be on we'll go twice a week still at some point.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we will.
Randomly here and there. We'll find things to talk about. So, but until we do, later in the week probably, everyone have a Happy New Year. Brian, thanks for joining me once again.
Always a pleasure, even in dark times such as these, to hear the light of light or the shining light in your voice, my friend.
Wow, that's very good. I'm going to put that on a poster. So
don't do it.
Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.